The village that vanished overnight. One night, an entire village went to sleep. By morning, it no longer existed. There was no sound of battle in the dark, no smoke rising into the sky, no screams, no warnings, no signs of panic. The village lay tucked away in the quiet countryside of 18th century Europe, a place so ordinary it barely appeared on maps. Stone cottages lined narrow paths. Wooden doors stood closed. Fires burned low in hearths as families drifted into sleep, unaware that history was about to erase them. When the sun rose, nothing moved. Travelers approaching the village found the streets eerily silent. Doors stood ajar. Tables were still set for breakfast. A loaf of bread lay half-cut as if the knife had been dropped mid-slice. Livestock wandered freely through empty yards, unfed and confused. No bodies, no signs of violence, no footprints leading away. It was as if the entire population had vanished in a single moment, without fear, without resistance, without explanation. Word of the disappearance spread quickly, drawing officials, scholars, and the curious from neighboring regions. They searched every house, every cellar, every road leading out of the village. Nothing, not a single clue to explain where hundreds of people had gone or why. Some whispered of a sudden evacuation, carried out in absolute silence. Others believed the land itself had turned hostile, swallowing its inhabitants whole. A few dared to suggest something darker, that the village had crossed paths with a force beyond human understanding. No matter the theory, one truth remained undeniable. By nightfall, the village was no longer a place of life. It was a question carved into the landscape, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Disappearance. The village lay hidden in a shallow valley, surrounded by low hills and dense stretches of forest that had stood unchanged for generations. It was the kind of place most travelers passed without noticing. A cluster of stone cottages, narrow dirt roads, and a small church whose bell marked the rhythm of daily life. There was nothing remarkable about it. Nothing that suggested it would one day become a mystery whispered about in fearful tones. On the evening it vanished, everything appeared normal. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys as families prepared their final meals of the day. Children chased one another through the dirt paths, their laughter echoing between the houses before being called home by tired parents. A blacksmith finished locking his workshop, wiping soot from his hands. A woman placed a pot of stew on the table, the scent of herbs filling the room. Lamps were lit one by one as dusk crept in, painting the village in warm amber light. No one sensed danger. No alarms rang. No storm approached. No enemy marched over the hills. The night arrived gently, as it always had, and yet something shifted. Sometime after midnight, no one knows exactly when, the village fell into a silence deeper than sleep. Dogs stopped barking. The wind seemed to pause. Even the insects, usually constant in the warm months, fell quiet. It was as if the world itself had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. By dawn, the village was no longer alive. The first to notice was a farmer from a neighboring settlement who arrived at sunrise to deliver grain. He found the main road empty. No one greeted him. No doors opened. The familiar sounds of morning, footsteps, voices, the clatter of tools were absent. At first, he assumed the villagers were simply slow to rise. But as he walked deeper into the settlement, unease crept in. Doors stood ajar. Inside the homes, life had been interrupted mid-moment. A pot of porridge sat cold on a wooden table, a spoon still resting inside. Beds were unmade, as if their occupants had risen suddenly. Boots remained neatly placed by doorways. Cloaks hung from hooks, untouched. Nothing appeared stolen, nothing broken. In one house, bread dough lay half-kneaded, drying where it had been abandoned. In another, a child's wooden toy rested on the floor, as though dropped during play. Candles had burned down to stubs, their wax frozen in uneven drips. Time itself seemed to have stopped and then simply moved on without the people who belonged there. Outside, animals wandered freely. Chickens pecked at the ground, unfed. A cow stood tethered to a post, lowing softly in confusion. Dogs sat beside empty doorways, waiting for masters who never returned. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture, no shattered windows, only absence. As word spread, villagers from nearby towns arrived, drawn by fear and curiosity in equal measure. They searched every building, every cellar, every attic. They called names into the forest, followed the paths leading away from the village, and found nothing. No footprints, no tracks, no evidence of a mass departure. The earth itself seemed to have swallowed them. The church stood at the center of the village, its wooden doors slightly open. Inside, candles still burned at the altar, their flames trembling in the stagnant air. A hymn book lay open, pages marked as if someone had been singing moments before disappearing. The church bell, however, told a stranger story. Its rope hung frayed, as though it had been pulled too hard, perhaps in warning or in fear, before going suddenly still. Outside, in the main square, a set of footprints ended abruptly in the dirt. They did not lead anywhere. They simply stopped. Panic began to spread among those searching. Some whispered that the villagers had been taken in the night. Others spoke of a sickness so sudden it struck all at once. A few crossed themselves and muttered prayers, convinced that something unholy had passed through the valley. Officials were summoned. Records were checked. Names were counted. Every man, woman, and child who had lived there was gone. Not a single body was ever found. Days turned into weeks. The village remained untouched, preserved like a moment trapped in time. Authorities debated explanations, but none fit the evidence. No signs of violence, no natural disaster, no trail leading away, only silence, and the unnerving sense that whatever had happened did not want to be seen. By the time the last investigator left, the village had already begun to feel unreal, like a place that existed between memory and myth. The houses stood, but the life within them was gone, erased in a single, unexplainable night. What force could empty an entire village without a sound? And more disturbingly, why had it chosen that one? The last signs. In the days that followed the discovery, the village became a place of uneasy investigation. What had once been a quiet settlement was now filled with unfamiliar footsteps, hushed voices, and the constant tension of unanswered questions. Every corner was examined, every object scrutinized, as if the smallest detail might whisper the truth of what had happened here. At first glance, the village appeared untouched by chaos. No fires, no collapsed buildings, no signs of forced entry. Yet the deeper the investigators looked, the more unsettling the details became. The first signs were subtle, footprints. They were found along the main road leading through the village, dozens of them, overlapping and scattered, as though many people had walked there at once. But the strangest part was not their number, it was their ending. Each set of footprints simply stopped, as if the people who made them had vanished mid-step. No trail led beyond the village boundary. No marks pointed toward the forest or the fields beyond. Some footprints were small, belonging to children. Others were deep and heavy, pressed by the boots of adults. A few were barefoot. All of them ended the same way, abruptly, unnaturally, as if the ground itself had erased the rest of the story. Investigators attempted to follow the impressions deeper into the soil, digging carefully, hoping to find tunnels or hidden paths. There were none. The earth beneath was undisturbed. As the days passed, more unsettling signs emerged. Inside the church, the bell rope hung torn and frayed, as though someone had pulled it with desperate force. The bell itself bore marks of repeated striking, louder and more frantic than any call to prayer. It was as if someone had tried to sound an alarm, one that no one came to answer. The pews remained neatly arranged, but several candles had burned all the way down, melting into thick pools of wax that had cooled long ago. Wax dripped across the altar like frozen tears. A hymn book lay open to a familiar song, its pages wrinkled by heat. The final verse was smudged, as though fingers had pressed against it in haste. In the village square, investigators discovered a handcart tipped onto its side. Inside lay vegetables freshly harvested, still damp with earth. Nearby, a basket of apples had spilled across the ground, some already rotting. Time had begun its slow work, but not enough time had passed to explain the complete absence of people. Even the animals seemed unsettled. Cows were found wandering without direction, their ribs beginning to show. Dogs lay curled near doorways, refusing to leave, their eyes fixed on empty thresholds as if waiting for a command that would never come. Chickens roamed freely, laying eggs that no one collected. The natural order had been interrupted, frozen in an unnatural pause. As officials documented the scene, rumors began to spread among those assisting the search. Some whispered that the villagers had heard something, a sound that drove them from their homes in terror. Others believed the disappearance had been sudden and silent, happening in the span of a single breath. One investigator noted something deeply unsettling. There were no signs of struggle anywhere in the village, no overturned furniture, no bloodstains, no weapons left behind. It was as if everyone had left willingly or had been taken without resistance. Theories began to form, each more unsettling than the last. Some believed the villagers had fled a threat they could not name, perhaps a gas seeping from the earth or a sickness that struck without warning. Others spoke of mass hysteria, of a collective panic that drove the entire population into the night. A few whispered darker ideas, that the village had been claimed by something beyond human understanding. One detail troubled investigators more than any other. In several homes, beds were found still warm. Not metaphorically, physically warm, as if the occupants had risen only moments before the search began. Yet no one had been seen leaving the village. No sounds had been heard during the night. No cries, no running footsteps, no horses fleeing down the road. Time itself seemed to have fractured. As night fell again, the village took on a different presence. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the empty streets. The wind carried faint sounds, creaks, whispers, distant knocks, that sent shivers through those still searching. Some claimed they heard footsteps behind them, only to turn and find nothing. One investigator reported seeing a figure standing at the edge of the village just before dusk, a shape too still to be human, too solid to be a shadow. When he called out, it vanished. His account was dismissed, yet he refused to return the following day. By the end of the second week, most of the officials had left. There was nothing more to document. No new evidence appeared. No answers revealed themselves. What remained were signs, small, haunting traces of lives interrupted. A half-written letter on a wooden table. A child's shoe beside an empty bed. A door left open, creaking softly in the wind. The village was no longer merely abandoned. It felt watched, and as word spread beyond the region, people began to whisper a single, chilling thought. Whatever had taken the villagers might still be there, waiting. The signs were all that remained, and they refused to be explained. Theories. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into uneasy silence, the mystery of the vanished village refused to fade. What had begun as a local shock slowly transformed into something far larger, a question that demanded answers, even if none could be proven. With no bodies, no clear evidence, and no witnesses, the disappearance became a blank space in history, inviting speculation to fill the void. Officials, scholars, and storytellers all offered explanations. Some were grounded in reason. Others drifted into the realm of fear and legend. Each theory attempted to make sense of what logic could not. The first and most widely accepted explanation was mass evacuation. According to this theory, the villagers had fled together in response to an unseen threat. Perhaps they had detected signs of a coming disaster, a toxic gas leaking from the earth, a contagious illness, or an approaching army. Supporters of this idea pointed to the lack of violence and the orderly state of the homes. If the villagers had left voluntarily, it would explain why nothing appeared disturbed. Yet this explanation unraveled under closer scrutiny. No nearby settlements reported an influx of refugees. No written records mentioned a sudden migration. And most troubling of all, there were no tracks leading away from the village. Not a single trail of footprints heading towards safety. If the people had left together, where had they gone? Another theory suggested a geological phenomenon, something rare and sudden, striking without warning. Some believed a toxic gas might have risen from beneath the earth, silently suffocating the population before dissipating. Others proposed a sinkhole or underground collapse that swallowed the villagers whole. But the land told a different story. The ground showed no signs of collapse, no cracks, no subsidence, no disturbed soil. And if gas had been responsible, why were the animals still alive? Why were there no bodies left behind? Then came the theory that unsettled even the most rational minds: collective hysteria. Psychologists speculated that a shared delusion or mass panic could have overtaken the village. Perhaps a rumor had spread, or a terrifying belief had taken hold, driving the entire population to flee at once. History had recorded such events before, crowds moved by fear rather than reason. But hysteria alone could not explain the silence. Even in panic, people scream, they leave chaos behind. They run until they collapse. Here, there was no sign of panic at all. The village appeared frozen at the exact moment life simply stopped. As these explanations failed to satisfy, darker ideas began to take root. Some whispered that the village had been claimed by something ancient, an entity tied to the land itself. Old legends resurfaced, half-forgotten stories passed down through generations, tales of places that demanded offerings, of valleys where people vanished if they stayed too long, of lands that were never meant to be settled. Local elders spoke in hushed tones about warnings their grandparents once shared, stories of lights seen on the hills at night, of voices carried by the wind, of travelers who vanished without a trace. These had once been dismissed as folklore. Now they felt uncomfortably relevant. Others turned their gaze upward. A few observers suggested something far stranger, that the villagers had encountered a force not of this world. Strange lights reported in the sky on the night of the disappearance were recalled by nearby towns. Lights that moved unnaturally, changing direction without reason. At the time, they were dismissed as illusions or atmospheric effects. Now, they were remembered differently. Had the village been taken? The idea was unsettling, even absurd, and yet it lingered. How else could so many people vanish without trace? How could an entire community be removed so completely? Religious interpretations soon followed. Some claimed the village had been punished, taken as judgment or warning. Others believed the people had been spared, lifted away from a world on the brink of ruin. Faith-based explanations spread quietly, whispered behind closed doors, offering comfort to some and dread to others. None of these theories could be proven. As years passed, the mystery deepened rather than faded. The village remained abandoned, slowly consumed by nature. Roofs collapsed, paths disappeared beneath weeds, but the silence endured, heavy and unresolved. Researchers returned again and again, hoping time would reveal what human understanding could not. Instruments were deployed, measurements taken, data recorded. Still, nothing definitive emerged. And yet, many who visited reported the same unsettling sensation, a feeling of being watched. Some claimed their equipment malfunctioned. Others swore they heard faint sounds, footsteps where no one walked, whispers carried on the wind. A few left early, unwilling to remain in a place that seemed to resist being understood. Skeptics dismissed these accounts as imagination fueled by suggestion. But even they admitted one thing: the village felt wrong. In the absence of truth, the story grew larger than the place itself. It became a symbol, a reminder of how easily certainty can dissolve, how fragile our understanding truly is. Perhaps the most unsettling theory of all was the simplest, that nothing extraordinary happened at all, that the villagers simply vanished and the world moved on without noticing. No monsters, no miracles, no cosmic explanation, just silence. And in that silence, a question that has never been answered: did something take the village, or did the village, for reasons forever unknown, choose to disappear? Silence that remained. Long after the last investigator left, long after the final report was filed and forgotten, the village remained exactly as it had been on the morning it was discovered, empty, untouched, suspended between presence and absence. Time moved forward everywhere else, but here it seemed to hesitate. Grass grew through the cracks in the stone roads. Roofs sagged beneath years of wind and rain. Trees crept closer, reclaiming doorways and windows, as if nature itself were trying to erase the memory of what once stood there. And yet, no matter how much the village decayed, the silence never faded. It settled deeper, thicker, pressing down on anyone who dared to return. Those who visited in later years often spoke of the same feeling, the sensation of being watched, not threatened, observed, as though the village was aware of its own emptiness, aware of those who walked its abandoned paths. Footsteps echoed too loudly. Whispers seemed to drift just beyond hearing. Some visitors left in minutes, others stayed longer, driven by curiosity, only to leave shaken and unable to explain why. The buildings told stories without words, a chair facing a cold fireplace, a child's name carved into a wooden table, a calendar frozen on the day before everything ended. These were not ruins of war or disaster. They were traces of lives interrupted, paused in mid-sentence. No graveyard filled with fresh graves, no official records of death, no final explanation, only absence. As years passed, the village slipped from public memory. Maps were redrawn, roads bypassed it. New generations grew up unaware that hundreds of people had once lived and vanished there. To the outside world, it became just another forgotten place swallowed by time. But for those who knew the story, the questions never faded. What force could remove an entire population without leaving a trace? Why were there no cries for help, no signs of resistance? And if the people did not die, where did they go? Some believe the answer lies in the land itself, that certain places hold memories or powers or boundaries humanity was never meant to cross. Others argue that the truth is far simpler and far more terrifying, that disappearance can happen quietly, without warning, and without reason. The village stands as a reminder of how fragile certainty truly is. We build homes believing they will protect us. We trust routines to anchor our lives. We assume tomorrow will come. But somewhere in a forgotten valley, an entire community proved how easily all of that can vanish. No final message was left behind, no explanation carved into stone, only empty rooms, open doors, and a silence so complete it feels intentional. Perhaps the greatest horror is not what happened to the villagers, but the possibility that whatever took them was never seen, never understood, and may still be out there, waiting. And if that is true, then the village did not disappear at all. It is still there, waiting.
Shadows crawl where the light won't go. A silent wind, it starts to grow.